Julia
Well, hello everyone. I've never used a microphone in my life. How are you? How is everyone? Wow, well, what an absolute delight to be swapping the sticky carpet of the Esplanade Hotel, where we usually film RocKwiz, to be here tonight. Now, the last time I was in Orange was in October at the Civic Theatre here doing RocKwiz. We were there. Who was there that night? Oh, not enough of you. That's disappointing. Oh, you'll know next time. We kicked off a 40-show tour here in Orange because of that amazing theatre. So well done you for having a beautiful theatre. Most of you missed a really good night. Just delighted to have been asked to come and host this because I always feel that action is the best antidote to despair. And I'll be honest with you, you're probably looking at me and thinking, Julia, why are you here? You don't live in Calare. What's going on? Well, I've been quite swept up in the independent movement since 2022, where I launched the campaign for Penny Ackery, who was standing in the seat of Hume against Angus Taylor. I always call him Angus Young, but that's AC/DC. I get it wrong every time. I know, wrong show. And to be in a basketball court in Goulburn with 250 people who had turned up to meet Penny, to get information, who were hungry and curious, was quite extraordinary. And I was quite switched on then. I did some Zoom events for some different independents, and I just genuinely think it's providing this light in a potentially very dark world. So I'm really quite honoured to be here, Orange, and thank you, Kate, for letting me be part of your show. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people, who are the traditional custodians of the land where we all meet today. I'd also like to pay respect to their people, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal Australians who are present. When we talk about country, traditional country, Professor Mick Dodson puts it like, we might mean homeland when we say country, or tribal or clan area, and we might mean more than just a place on the map. For us, country is a word for all the values, places, resources, stories and cultural obligations associated with that area and its features. It describes the entirety of our ancestral domains, and that's the earth we really want to look after and thrive on and all be together on. So tonight, you are going to hear 3 extraordinary ideas from 3 extraordinary people who have done the research. They've modelled the idea. It exists in real time. It's not pretend. Also, we're going to hear from 3, maybe 4, big ideas out here. We've invited people who might have a big idea on something in their community that they'd like to address or fix. If they had a notion, they're going to pitch it to you this evening in 60 seconds. Won't that be a treat? And we'll ask them questions about it. So it's a beautiful moment to all get together and get curious. Now, yes, there is a bar up the back. Very good. We've all found that. Well done, everyone. And this is going to go for about 90 minutes or so. No interval, but we feel like you'll be engaged for most of it. And if you're not, well, don't put your phone on. That's all we're asking. Now, hands up if you're kind of familiar with what energy transition means. Hands up, very good. Hands up if you know why we have to have an energy transition. Very good. Hands up if you're a bit like me and you kind of need help. Great, because I'm here also to get answers. Part of being of this my volunteering has been hosting all these different events around the country, and I'm learning as well as we go. And I just think it's fantastic to be curious and find out more about what's going on in this crazy world we're living in. Now, let's begin with a man that I've known for at least 24 hours, because that's when we met, Ken. It was beautiful. It was on Zoom, and I didn't mind it. Just quickly, I'll do quick intros to everyone and then do longer ones when they actually speak. But just to kick us off, please welcome Professor Ken Baldwin, ANU Institute for Climate, Energy and Disaster Solutions. He's waving. Bruce Chapman AO, who is an economist in the middle. And frankly, from what I've seen, the next standing member of this electorate, it will be Kate Hook, independent in Calare. I know. This one here. That one there. That one. I mean, you'd be mad not to. Now, Ken, you're first up. How exciting. You get to speak first. Now, he's going to talk about nuclear and renewables. They're big ideas for Australia, the pros and the cons. I love a pro and a con. It's my favourite thing. Now, in case you didn't hear during the clapping, he's part of the Institute for Climate, Energy and Disaster Solutions. And aren't you just thrilled and relieved that there's someone that's actually thinking about that? I mean, seriously. It's really extraordinary, and we thank you for the incredible work you've done for so many years, and that you're here to speak to us in Orange today is amazing. FYI, in 2004, he won the Australian Government Eureka Prize for promoting understanding of science. Imagine that. For his role in initiating and championing, wait for it, Science Meets Parliament. Well, you know what? That was 20 years ago, and I still think they don't get it. So, it's up to you, Ken. Please welcome him to talk about nuclear and renewables, Ken Baldwin.
So thank you very much, Julia, and it's a pleasure to be here in Orange. I was here, like Julia, not too long ago, enjoying mountain biking on Mount Canobolas. What a great place. So, this evening, given that my background is in physics, I thought I'd just walk through some of the energy policies that are, in the pipeline for the current election. The title is Nuclear Power for Australia, but I'll be talking about the two choices really that are before us. And really this is in large part the energy election. We're going to make some very serious choices in the next few weeks about Australia's future for the next few decades. So it's a really big part of the election portfolio of both major parties and of course independents and other parties in the Parliament. So let's first of all look at the two major choices in front of us. Labor, which, as we know, has a target of 82% renewable electricity in the national electricity market by 2030. We're kind of getting there, but struggling a little bit for various reasons. We can talk about that in the discussion afterwards. All coal under this plan will be retired by 2037 in the electricity grid. By 2050, 95% or thereabouts will be renewables. The rest will be a bit of gas still left in the system to back the renewables up. But it'll mainly be wind and solar. There will be replacement of gas needed if we are truly to decarbonise everything by 2050, so that's still a challenge. We can talk about that later. And of course, the ultimate goal is net zero by 2050. The Coalition have a different plan, which was announced last year, which is to replace coal with nuclear and gas. By 2050, roughly speaking, there would be 54% renewables in the system, so they're not abandoning renewables. It will still be part of the system, the majority of the system. 38% will be nuclear and the rest will be a combination of gas and storage. And as we'll see in a few minutes, it looks like coal probably has to be extended beyond 2037, even though they're planning for the first nuclear power stations to come on board in that year. The end result of that, of course, is, as the Climate Change Authority has modelled, will be that there will be more emissions as a result of the fact that the retirement of coal is slowed and there is more gas in the system. And the understanding that we have on the modelling that they did with Frontier Economics is that this is looking at a slightly smaller economy in the future than Labor is looking at, and in particular, there is not a lot of provision there for exporting Australia's abundant renewable energy sources, okay? Whether that's directly through undersea cable overseas or through things like hydrogen. But again, the Coalition aim is net zero by 2050. It just means that because the emissions will continue longer than under the Labor plan, it'll be hard in the 2040s to get that down to zero. Okay, so that's where we are. So now I'll talk a little bit around nuclear and what are the key issues that face nuclear power being generated in this country. Of course, as we all know, to start with, nuclear power is prohibited by federal government legislation. There are 2 acts in the federal parliament that prohibit the use of nuclear power, and there are a number of acts in the various state parliaments that also prohibit nuclear power being used. So that's the first cab off the rank, but really, even if that's removed, there are 3 key issues for nuclear power in Australia. The first is timeliness. We'll talk about that. Will it be too late? The second is cost. Will it be too expensive? And the third is need. Will we actually need it? So we'll walk through those in a couple of minutes. So first we'll look at time. How long does it take to build a nuclear reactor? Well, first of all, let me make the point. We need to compare apples with apples, okay? So we need to look at countries which have never had nuclear before, which are doing it for the first time, and buying it basically from overseas. So the United Arab Emirates is one such country. It's just recently built 4 nuclear reactors from scratch, and it's taken roughly 9 years for each reactor to be built. Okay? UAE is a slightly different country from Australia, I would suggest. Western countries, in fact, have taken much longer in recent years. So some countries have taken several decades to build nuclear reactors for all sorts of reasons. The coalition are proposing what are called small modular reactors to be a part of this plan, and if they aren't, then they'll build, normal big nuclear reactors. There are no small modular reactors yet in the Western world. There are some in China and Russia, but there are no commercial nuclear reactors yet. So let's park that to the side for a moment. So let's look at the timeframes. Let's say optimistically, if the coalition win the election, in their first term, they would have to gain the social licence to go down this path. They would maintain that they did if they won, but they would still have to remove the prohibition on nuclear power in the legislation, and they would have to get the states to do the same thing, or they would have to override the state legislation, which is something that federal governments very rarely do, okay? Then they would have to build a regulatory framework. You can't start constructing a nuclear reactor until you know what the rules are. Okay, so building a regulatory framework will take at least 5 years. In fact, the head of the regulatory authority that regulates our existing scientific reactors, not a power reactor, at Lucas Heights, has said it will take 8 to 10 years. So let's say we can do it a bit quicker, maybe 5. It'll still take, as the UAE and other countries are showing, at least of the order of 10 years to build, okay? So that means that the first time you can turn the switch and generate electricity on nuclear power in Australia will be around 2040. That assumes that, you're building the regulatory framework in parallel with the removal of prohibition. So that would mean 5 years for those 2 and 10 years to build, so that's 2040 at least, but it's more likely that it'll be the mid-2040s if you can do these things sequentially. Okay, cost. There's been a lot of talk about cost in the media. So what I'm showing you now is the independent costing by the CSIRO and with the Australian Energy Market Operator, 2 independent authorities and research bodies that have compared the cost of all forms of generation on what is called the levelised cost of electricity, or LCOE, which basically takes into account everything. The investment costs, the maintenance costs, the fuel cost, the running costs, all of this combined, divided by the amount of energy produced over the lifetime of the plant, and that gives you the levelised cost of electricity. So a good number on this scale is roughly $100, okay, across there. And what we can see from this graph is that fossil fuels, so brown coal, black coal and gas, are more expensive than solar and wind, okay? And so this is in 2030, these predictions are going forward. They are already cheaper, solar and wind, than any other form of generation. And they're certainly a lot cheaper than nuclear, so both large-scale nuclear and small modular reactors. And then, of course, there is a lot of argument around these figures, and sometimes there's been shooting at the messenger being CSIRO, but nonetheless, I've worked with some of these people in this team, and they are doing absolutely the best possible job with the best information in the world at the moment. And the big argument against these numbers is that solar and wind, just on their own, won't do it for us. And of course that's true. We'll need storage to be able to generate electricity when solar and wind aren't working, and we'll need extra transmission lines to get the electricity from the renewable energy zones in the regions to the major load centres on the coast. Well, CSIRO have done those numbers as well, despite what everyone will tell you. And the numbers are over here, and you can see they're slightly more if you've got 60% renewables, 70%, 80% and 90% renewables in the system. But even if you've got that amount in the system, it's still cheaper than nuclear, and it's still cheaper than coal and gas. So the numbers don't lie. Solar and wind, even with extra transmission and storage, is cheaper going forward than anything else. And we talked with Julia about the energy transition. We're going to have to do this energy transition anyway, because all the coal-fired power stations are ageing and they're going to have to be retired by the 2030s no matter what. So this transition is going to happen irrespective of climate change, and the cheapest way to do that is with renewables. So that's what these numbers show us. Okay, the need. This shows a graph of Australia's energy systems from 2009 all the way through to 2050, when we have to decarbonise for net zero. And this is produced by the Australian Energy Market Operator. It's called the Integrated System Plan. And what it shows is coal retiring, getting less and less down the bottom, gas staying in the system to back up renewables, and then solar in yellow, and and although this is hard to see, wind in this sort of greeny colour, will be the dominant forms of energy out to 2050. So the interesting thing is that coal, this is a blown up picture of the retirement of coal-fired power stations, is going to happen all by 2037. That's because they're getting old and they just need replacement. And in fact, this date has been brought forward from out here when the company said they'd retire in 2045 to down here, simply because it's becoming uneconomic when they're faced with the competition from very cheap solar and wind, and the maintenance costs are getting higher and higher, and with climate change, with warmer temperatures, thermal power stations actually are much more unreliable. So that's the deadline for retirement. And what happens? Let's say the coalition talking about replacing coal at that stage. Well, already there'll be another 120 gigawatts pardon me, of solar and wind in the system by that time. So this will be huge competition for nuclear, and particularly in the middle of the day when the sun's shining, nuclear will have nowhere to hide. So that's the conundrum. The need really won't be there by that stage. Then there's a bit of gas in the system, and so the next question is, what do we do about the remaining gas? Well, the answer to that is a hard question. To decarbonise the last few percent of the gas in the system, we could either use carbon capture and storage, which is unproven at scale with the gas that we have, or we could make hydrogen, which is what you've all done at school, use renewable electricity and water to make hydrogen. Then you burn the hydrogen in the gas turbine and make electricity again, but this is very inefficient. So that will be expensive. Or you could vastly overbuild solar and wind so that somewhere they're always operating, but that will be very expensive as well. Or you could use small modular reactors, which have a number of advantages. I won't go through them all there, but which allow you to generate electricity and switch it in and out as you switch each of these individual modules in and out. So all of those choices will be expensive, and I don't think anybody can say at this stage in time which of these will be cheaper in 2045 or 2050. So all of this, of course, assumes technological neutrality. But in Australia, we don't have a technologically neutral approach currently. As I mentioned, Australia is one of the few countries that has a legislated prohibition on the development of nuclear power. So perhaps, although nuclear will be way too late to do something about climate change up until the late 2040s, perhaps we need to keep the door open. So that's why removing the legislated ban would be consistent with a technologically neutral approach and would enable an open choice of the cheapest, most effective and timely options, whatever they might be. So that's a very quick introduction to the prospects of nuclear power, and thank you very much for listening.
Wow. It's a good thing you spell it out, Ken, because I didn't do science in year 11 and year 12, and I should have had. Now, we're going to take a couple of questions from the floor. Have a little think. Well, there's a hand up there already. You've talked about the cost. You've talked about the climate of it. There's some good pros and cons up there. I'm going to go straight to questions. I'm going to come to you like an Oprah figure. I'm going to say Dr. Phil, he's insane. Here we go. I'm just wondering where you're putting pumped hydro in that.
Yes, so pumped hydro is a form of storage like batteries, and absolutely we'll need that to back up renewables. So on that picture, which I can probably retrieve, you'll see that, that there is storage in this graph. It's sitting down here, and actually there's a few colours that are missing, but that will play a role, and that storage will be needed because obviously the sun and wind don't operate the whole time. Pumped hydro at the moment is looking to provide very long-term storage of the order of a week or thereabouts, as opposed to batteries which are used for short-term storage of the order of hours. But we'll absolutely need pumped hydro.
Gee, I'm glad you know what you're talking about. That's exciting. Hello there. What's your question?
Well, it's I actually was asking a further question about this slide. Is what ever happened to geothermal energy? It was a thing, and now it's not a thing anymore.
And there's also wave energy and tidal energy and all those forms. They're all very expensive. And they're not commercial. They've never been developed really commercially at scale. And although Australia has geothermal resources deep in the ground, it's not New Zealand, where the geothermal is right on the surface. In fact, it's sometimes up in the air, and you can use it much more readily. So we don't have that option.
What about overseas? What about Europe?
Not many volcanoes in Europe.
All right. Clearly I didn't do geography either. So, what's your question?
So when you say carbon neutral, what is the actual metric that you say that's carbon neutral? Because we did basic math. The trees that we have in London and Australia make Australia carbon neutral already, actually negative if you want to get it based on carbon. And when you say carbon, why is carbon a problem when it's only 0.4% of the Earth's atmosphere? Why is that such a problem?
Because it disproportionately traps the heat, which causes the greenhouse effect, and why do we have? Why do we not grow more trees? It's simply because we can't grow enough Amazon rainforest to get rid of the CO2 that's going to the air every year. And even if we did, we'd have to grow that Amazon rainforest each year and every year in order to counter things into the future if we continue putting CO2 into the atmosphere. It's as simple as that. Not enough land.
Yes, there's a question up the back here. Marvellous. 2 more and then we'll move on. Thank you.
My understanding is that nuclear power stations, like coal power stations, can't regulate up and down quickly. To mesh in with the large-scale solar and wind, that's essential. So therefore, to even have nuclear, you wouldn't be able to use it because you can't rent it to match the demand. So what's your question?
Yep, that's correct. So I'll speak to that. So here's a picture of energy generation in Australia on a weekly basis. You can see each day things go up and down, up and down, up and down. So down the bottom is brown coal, black coal, solar is yellow, green is wind, hydro is blue. And what you see is exactly this phenomena you're talking about, is things ramping up and down, okay? So demand ramps up and down. It's low in the middle of the day, high at night when everyone gets home, starts their air conditioning and all this sort of thing, gets low in the middle of the night. And so this is a cycle that happens every day. And some days, you'll notice, Solar, in particular, in the middle of the day, chews out the business model for thermal power stations. So coal and gas are thermal power stations. They make heat. You use that to make steam. You make electricity. Same with nuclear, as you pointed out. They're also a thermal power station. And you're right, current nuclear power stations aren't easy to ramp up and down, so they can't follow this nearly so well. And not only that, but it also chews into their business model. Literally, solar eats their lunch in the middle of the day. Now, that's a different story though. In the next generation nuclear reactors, they are a bit more rampable than the current nuclear power stations are, so you can turn them up and down a little bit. Plus, if you went to small modular reactors, you'd have a bank of these things, right? And you'd switch them in and out as you needed them. You could even dissipate the heat they generate just by evaporating water. And also the individual modules are rampable more. So in the future, nuclear will be much better able to follow load like this, than it is at the moment. But at the moment, you're quite right. In countries with nuclear power that have lots of renewables, it's starting to be very difficult for them.
Thank you. Excellent question. Final question up here from a young man.
Does Australia need nuclear power, or could it survive 100% on renewable energy, provided that the battery technology is appropriate?
So I think I answered that in this slide here, which is that we can get to probably 95% renewables without any trouble at all. And we'll do that probably by the 2040s. But the last 5%, getting rid of that flexible graph on the previous picture I showed, that's going to be really tough. And those are the four options in front of us, and nuclear is one of those options if we take a technologically neutral approach. So yes, it could do the last little bit, and it could, with small modular reactors, be rampable to be flexible enough to do that. But who knows, in the 2040s, what's going to be the cheapest option for Australia?
A round of applause for Ken and his excellence. There's so many great questions that we could talk about. Our thing tonight was to have every speaker speak for about 10 minutes or so, give you, a presentation, get some questions throughout the month, and that's going to work as well. And we've got some big ideas in the audience as well. People who just have great things that they want to talk about. Are you excited? Because I'm excited, Guy. I'm really excited. Our first pitch from the audience is Guy Webb, and he's going to be talking about how farmers can become climate superheroes. Please welcome him to the stage. I mean, you can sit here or you can use the lecture, whatever you're most comfortable with.
What would you rather me do?
No, my darling, it is completely in your comfort zone. Yeah, let's go up there. Very good, up there. Yeah. Another round of applause. He makes his way. Now, I'm going to be a bit of a mole about it. You've only got a minute.
Okay.
But you know what? I'm going to give you 90 seconds because you're the first up. I know, first up. I mean, come on, 90 seconds. Jesus. Here we go. In your own good time, I'll do a gentle halfway. No way.
Okay.
Here we go. Here we go.
I'll do my best.
You're amazing. Go for it.
Okay, and a little hat tip to Julia and RocKwiz. Some 50 years ago, believe it or not, a chap called Bon Scott on the 20th of September 1976 screamed down the microphone, "Dirty deeds, done dirt cheap," while Angus Young pounded the A chord, G chord and E minor chord. Meanwhile...
I mean, round of applause.
Thanks, Julia. I thought I'd better throw that in. It becomes relevant. At that same time, 1976, like I say, nearly 50 years ago, pinch me now, I was 11 years old, a farm boy out the back of Canobolas, and I thought those guys were pretty cool because they were talking about the dirt. Obviously very interested in farming and loved the soil. 1976, CO2 levels in the air around about 330 parts per million when I was 11 years old. Now I'm just
get the needle up near 60 and it's 425 parts per million. Nearly 100 parts per million of heat trapping gas have increased in my short lifetime since I was 11 years old. Meanwhile, humans on the planet control a whopping 42% of the terrestrial habitable Earth surface as farming and as grazing. It's the biggest terrestrial carbon sink on the planet, capable of drawing down gigatons of carbon dioxide out of the air, where we don't want it, and into the soil, where we do want it, because soil carbon is really good for fertility, for plants, and for climate resilience. So at my business, Lone Bio, based right here in Orange, we've developed the technology that allows farmers to take that carbon out of the air and store it into the soil for decades to up to millennia. Long-term carbon sequestration. We do it with a specialised fungi. We do it right here in Orange, as I say. It's deployable at scale globally and gigatonally. That's a new word. Our aim is to make Orange the epicentre of global soil carbon sequestration. We want to do some dirty deeds, and we want to empower farmers to become carbon capturing climate superheroes. Oh, questions.
Wow, I love it. All here in Orange, amazing. Now, could this technology scale to have an impact globally on climate change?
Yes, Julia, that's what captured us in the first place when we stumbled across the technology. It came out of Sydney Uni, an old retiring Professor Peter McGee, looking down a microscope, thinking about fungi, thinking about climate and thinking about soil, found this organism that's really good at sequestering carbon. And it's as simple as putting the spores of the fungus on the seeds, say wheat, canola, barley, pulse crops, any of the crops you're growing, at the same time as you're sowing, and away it goes. It starts sequestering carbon. So it's the easy button for farmers to become carbon sequesters.
I mean, he's a magician, I would imagine. I mean, really, that's quite extraordinary. And why would farmers be interested in this?
So the fundamentals of farming relies on the soil, and it relies on soil health and the ability of the soil to hold water and nutrients. So carbon in the soil, think of your veggie garden. The more composty stuff you've got in your soil, the darker it is, the better your veggies grow. It's the same out in the paddock. So it's good for farming. It's a plus. It's not so good in the atmosphere, but really good in the soil. But also there's a market for carbon. So carbon credits, everyone's heard of carbon credits. So farmers can participate in a carbon market and put carbon for once on their balance sheet of their business, rather than being an externality that I'd love to do something about climate change, but I can't afford that. They can actually make money out of sequestering carbon and do a social good. So they love the idea.
And social good, at the end of the day, is a great thing as well. What an extraordinary man who's put together an incredible idea like this, mentioned AC/DC and mushrooms, which are a French girl's best friend. Give him a round of applause!
Thank you.
Our next little 10-minute speech is from Bruce Chapman. Bruce is an emeritus professor of economics and has worked at the ANU since 1984. He's got extensive experience in public policy, including the motivation and design of the Higher Education Contribution Scheme, which is the first national income contingent loan scheme. Now, you just remember this little term, income contingent loan. I call it ICL. The ICL scheme, using the income tax system for collection. He's going to be referencing this in his talk with you now. So, solar and battery HEX scheme. Let's see what he's going to be talking about. Please make him very welcome. Bruce, over to you.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and thank you, Kate, for inviting me. When you're an economist, you don't often get invited anywhere.
We love you, Bruce. We love you. Talk close to the microphone. Thank you.
We're just so dull. The only good thing really about being an economist is you don't have to spend any money on contraceptives. And the reason is our personalities are so miserable that the opportunity just never arises. So I gave a talk a few months ago at a conference organised by the New South Wales Government on alternative ways of thinking about energy policy, and about 2 months ago I got an email from Kate, and Kate said, I heard you talk about the idea of income contingent loans, which I'll explain in a minute, and how that could be used for electrification of households, for solar energy on the roof, for example, or electrification for business. And she said, and I completely believe this, that she thought that kind of financial arrangement was a pretty thoughtful way to go. And I'll explain in a minute why it is a thoughtful way to go and why it is probably the fairest and most equitable and relatively inexpensive financing mechanism for households to become electrified. About 13 years ago, I met Ken Baldwin. He's at my university, but universities are big, and across campus you don't kind of meet people, but I met him at what was called a Public Policy Fellows meeting, and I didn't know anything about physics. He probably knows a lot more about economics. I can tell from his slides that he knows a lot more about economics than I do about physics. And I said to Ken, what's the biggest public policy issue when it comes to renewables becoming part of the mainstream of energy consumption in Australia? And he said, poor people can't afford them. Poor people do not have the money. Can I have the outline, please, Jono? And this is a really, really important issue. I'm not going to follow that very closely because I want to be much more interesting than a normal economist. So I'll just start off with Ken, really. And what had happened to me, my whole professional life since 1989 has been about this concept called an income contingent loan. It is not like any other loan you'll get. And the reason it's different is that when you have a loan for a mortgage or buy a car or whatever you have a loan for, the bank or the financing arrangement will require you to pay a given amount of money every month. It doesn't matter if you haven't got the money. What that means is that most people, it's okay to have normal loans. For most people, they won't struggle, but for a small, not that small, a large proportion of people who take out loans will sometimes get into trouble with them. They've lost their job. They're looking after an aged parent. Their partner's unwell. They're unwell. With mortgage-type loans, you have to pay no matter what. And if you can't, you've got a problem. The bank could forgive it, or in many countries that have student loans organised by government, they will forgive it for a while, but eventually there will be default. And default is one of the worst things that can happen to you in your life. And basically what default does to you as a consumer, as a borrower, as a citizen, is it ruins your credit reputation. It means you can't borrow for anything else. That's kind of the gist of it all. But since 1989, when we implemented the HEX scheme, and think about what HEX is, let me tell you what it is. When Australian students enrol in a university course, they pay nothing. Everyone can enrol for nothing, but they will commit to repaying the tuition costs. And at that stage it was 25%, but only in the future and only if they've got the capacity to pay. This is radically different from a normal loan because it offers insurance, and the single most important word in thinking about income contingent loans is that borrowers are insured. They're insured against having difficulties of repaying a debt when they haven't got the money. They're insured against default. When COVID turned up, graduate labour markets all around the world were in complete disarray. And people who had loans, most student loans in the world are normal bank-type loans. Those people who were new college graduates in the United States, for example, who didn't have jobs but had student loans, which was half of them, their loan systems, which are pernicious and nasty, basically, required them to repay at the time. This is a huge issue in the United States and for most of the world. In Australia, if you had a HECS debt and COVID turned up, it did not matter. Now, I met somebody who was a recent graduate. She graduated from ANU in 2020 and she didn't have a job. The labour markets were in dysfunction. And I said to her, it was a bit cheeky of me really, I said, what are you doing about your HECS debt? And she said, oh my God, do I have to do something about my HECS debt? I haven't got any money. I said, no, you don't have to do anything. Just the good thing about HECS is just ignore it if you've got a problem, because the government will ignore it, the government will forgive you. You have insurance. In the United States, there are over 13 million people now who are in default from their student loan because they didn't have the money. They were unemployed, or they got poor jobs, or they got unwell. Their lives are ruined. They cannot borrow, they cannot be financially independent. In Australia and other countries that have our system, New Zealand, England, Wales, Hungary, there was no issue. There was no discussion. Nobody, often journalists, when they think there's something horrible going on with HECS, they ring me up and say, it's all your fault. But nobody talked to me about the HECS repayment obligations in COVID, in the pandemic, because there were no issues, because of insurance. And this is the basic critical point about income contingent loans. Now let's ask this question. So that's basically what an income contingent loan is. You can do this for many, many things. I'm pleased to meet a farmer tonight. We've designed a lot of income contingent loans, or we call them revenue contingent loans, to help farmers in times of drought. What happens in a drought, and you all know this very well, the variance in revenue is really huge in the agricultural sector. Naught revenue, through the roof revenue, okay revenue, naught, through the roof. What drought it means for farmers is that they need a financing mechanism that protects them. The governments in the past used to give billions of dollars worth of grants, and they were so unfair because most farmers didn't get them. But a revenue contingent loan meant you give the money to the farmer during a drought and they pay it back, but only when their profits are really high in the future. It's insurance. It's what economists call income smoothing. There are no victims from this. There is no default. Thank you very much. So that's the kind of idea that goes with income contingent loans. And since that idea was implemented in 1989, a few people, and I've worked with all of them, have thought about income contingent loans for a whole host of things. Droughts, one example. For sustainable investments in ecologically sustainable aspects of farmers fixing up dams, for example, shelter belts, for example, things that farmers might be a bit reluctant to borrow for a bank because it takes a long time to get the return. We've thought about this for many areas, for extending paid parental leave. 20 weeks is not a very long time to take off work. But the bank won't help you get a loan because you've got no collateral. Governments won't push it for more than 20 weeks. You could have a household contingent debt so that you could stay an extra 6 months. You would pay it back, but only when your income is high. And this is true about HECS. If your income is never high enough, you pay nothing. And that's basically what happens to about 15%. Now, that's basically the story, and when Ken and I then modelled it. So that was 2012, and we modelled it using census data. It was not very sophisticated, it was not very complicated. We just looked like households and asked the question, if you want to electrify households, and Saul Griffith, you may know that name, Saul Griffith's group, Electrification Rewiring Australia, they've now joined up with the ANU to do the modelling in a more complex way than what Ken and I did. But what Ken and I showed, that you could actually finance the rewiring, the solar energy, rooftop solar, for a vast majority of the households. And if you design it properly, the cost to the government is approximately nothing. And the reason that this works, is this magic? Is this how? This cannot be true, and it can't be interesting if it's coming from an economist. The reason that it happens is that the government has got the capacity to say to a citizen, would you like that money in the future when you've got it, to give yourself something now? Because we have got the mechanism, the tax mechanism, to deliver something in your personal future when you're doing well and give you the benefit now. It is such a simple idea, and governments can do that. All this modelling has been done. Ken and I began it with households. We're doing it with Saul Griffiths Group now, again with household, much more sophisticated way. You can do it for businesses, particularly small businesses. Small businesses are cash strapped. They don't want to be going to the bank and saying, give us another loan. Loans are a problem because they're risky. You can foreclose, you can default, you can lose everything. If the loan is actually one which takes into account your capacity to pay, small business, even cash-strapped small business, they can afford to do this as the households can. And the reason we like this, it's basically socially just. It means that all the people with the money can buy rooftop solar now. What happens to them in the future is their electricity bills go down. But if you don't have the money, you can't but purchase that in the first place. So there's a double inequity here. Without this kind of government intervention, the relatively poor households, the cash-strapped businesses, they're the ones that can't take advantage of the huge benefits that come from alternative energy sources because they're credit constrained and governments can help do this. Kate wrote, she read our highly technical and extremely dull literature on how you do this, and she said, she was very polite. She said, do you mind if I kind of chop it around a little bit because I'd like it to be kind of more accessible? She didn't say that, but she has written a 1.5-page outline on income contingent loans for renewables. I highly recommend it. I must say, I was so pleased that Kate invited me because our kind of work, we've been talking to governments about this for a very long time. Liberal governments, coalition governments, Labor governments, they just haven't had the interest to think kind of outside the square. And I thank you, Kate, for doing that. Thank you.
Having those bold ideas, making bold choices, because I think we're living in a time now where we can't keep doing things in millimetres or in day. It's got to be bold. We need, and the independents are the only ones who are boldly going, I'll give a go at integrity, I'll give a go at getting HECS, I'll give a go at doing tax reform. At least they're trying, at least they're putting their neck out because they're just representing you and you're telling them what they need. Now, questions for Bruce? Any questions for Bruce? All up the back. Let me jazz run my way up the back. Years of training in dance, mainly jazz and modern. Thanks for asking.
Hi, I'm a bit greedy. I've got two. The first is actually probably a question for both you and Kate, which is how can we protect the politicisation of these loan schemes? Because obviously we've got HECS, but the coalition have already politicised it by increasing the cost of certain career choices that negatively affect those with lower incomes. And then the second is probably slightly more technical, which is how would you structure, I suppose, the loan aspect if there are multiple of these income contingent loans on a salary? So for example, if someone had HECS and another loan,
Two questions. You have them. You can have them. Yes, Bruce.
This question came up a little while ago when a few of us have been doing work on kind of HECS for everything, to be ridiculous. Elite athletes should be... Leighton Hewitt got a huge amount of money from taxpayers. Hey, you got $34 million out of tennis, Leighton. Can we just have a little bit back? It's a revenue contingent. We want to do it for the extension of paid parental leave. You can do it for childcare, for example. You can do it for low-income housing credits, and it's already there for HECS. You could do it for income support and other areas of tertiary education. So what if, and then we have it now for solar energy. So is it possible that somebody will have their entire income taken away with income contingent loans and wake me up and say, okay, you finally got somewhere after all, we've got more than just HECS. It's going to be, in theory, an issue down the track, but hey, we're nowhere near down the track. HECS has been around for 36 years now. And even though it's been shown to work fine, more than triple the number of university students we have now. There's been no kind of issues of access. All these other extensions of the work, including the work I've done with Ken, haven't been taken up. So it will be kind of a great luxury to say, oh, we've got so many kind of fair and equitable new financing income contingent loans. That's the next problem. We're so far away from it. I don't have an answer, and I tell you what, I won't need one because we're not going to get that many extensions of it. I don't know about the politicisation of these issues. I understand politics almost zero. I would like to point out that when HECS was proposed and instituted by the Hawke government in 1989, the coalition had a tertiary financing system. It was upfront fees with scholarships, which is what used to happen before fees were abolished. But within 2 years, they'd gone to HECS. They'd gone to income contingent loans. And why did they do that? Because it was working fine. So you've got many different governments over 36 years. The essence, the conceptual basis of income contingency has never changed. And I think so long as things turn out and to be workable, and this was administratively very straightforward as well, I don't think the politics will be a big deal.
Kate, did you want to speak to that?
No, I think that's it.
Yes, sir. I won't speak to that, I'll speak in a minute. Great.
With an income contingent loan, that could be used for things like upgrading technology for small business, or any business I suppose, but especially small business and households to use more efficient utensils and technology like induction cooking instead of gas.
Yes.
And normal electrical hobs.
Yes.
The advantage of that is it's also reducing the amount of energy you need to produce because they're far more efficient.
No, I agree with you, and what Ken and I, in my mind, which is not a very kind of sophisticated mind about energy issues, in my mind it was kind of rooftop solar. But batteries, sure, electric cars are harder because they're expensive, but that price is falling. You can do this, and I think it's particularly well suited to small business if it's designed properly. You don't want people abusing the system and taking out contingent loans in small business who are fly-by-nighters and can avoid repaying it. But so long as you've got rules in place, you can make it work. The biggest example, and I think the biggest disappointment of all the policy work I've done in decades, was JobKeeper. JobKeeper was needed. The country had to be locked down for health reasons. It was the first time I'd ever thought about the idea that a government regulated close down, lockdown in business. So they had to do something to stop a recession. So what that government did in 2020 was to spend a lot of money. That is a very fine idea, but they did not have to do it as grants. $89 billion was given in grants. You could have made these revenue contingent loans. The whole federal budget is importantly constrained because of $89 billion of debt that did not have to be incurred. We've modelled all this. I talked to Treasury quite a lot. We've got a lot of attention on the modelling. We believe that you could have got about 90% of it back and it would all been protected for the borrowers. Instead, we've got $89 billion worth there when it could have been designed properly for revenue contingent loans. And some of this was kind of really poorly thought through, in my view. Qantas got a JobKeeper sum of money of $842 million. $842 million. Could you believe that Qantas could not have afforded to repay that depending on their future profits? Of course they could. And the businesses that got it, of the $89 billion, basically none of them repaid it, but I don't think it's their fault. The government could have made it contingent on future profits or revenue to save the budget, but it wasn't done. So the answer is you can do this for a lot of things. You've got to be very careful that it's designed in a way that people don't choose to do it because they believe that they won't repay. That's the biggest design challenge. I think in most areas that can be sorted out.
And one more question here. Oh, there's two, there's three. Can you give another comment?
I've got two kids with fixed debts. One's making money and paying it off. The other one will probably never get around to it. And she thinks about earning more money. Is having an income detention loan, is there a disincentive to start to earn more money again?
Well, just think about the data, and I'm sympathetic to people who are a bit worried about their HECS debt, but I don't think it gets explained well enough. I was disappointed in the debate of 2 years ago, the complaints about indexation, as if the indexation was going to damage current debtors or current students. When you think about the data, a typical HECS debt is about $28,000. The lifetime income advantage of a graduate over their lifetime, on average, about 1.8 million. So we're talking small amounts. If it was a normal debt where you had to pay it no matter what your circumstances were, there's a problem. It is protected debt. But I understand they're paying for it. I think they're paying for it in the fairest possible way. And the other thing that sometimes people say to me, it's really unfair, but I have to pay a HECS debt when years and years ago people didn't pay for universities, and that was true. The system is hugely bigger now. When John Dawkins announced in Cabinet, the Hawke Keating Cabinet endorsed it, they promised to spend all the money on university places. That's what they did. A lot of people now with HECS debts, with a different financing system, would not have got into the system. I don't mean to sound defensive about it because I do think it's fair. I hope your daughter's not worried. Show her the data. The government has recently done something really good. They've lifted the first income threshold from where it was much too low at $54,000 a year, and people paying 4% of their income. It's now at $67,000 at 1%. That means about $12 a week until you start getting $70,000 or $80,000. I think it's been designed badly until recently. Now I think it's going to be fine. I'll send you all the data. I don't want her to be worried.
Oh, he doesn't want her to be worried. That's nice. Although, Bruce, I will just say for free, people in the arts didn't get JobKeeper, FYI. Nothing. Because apparently we're not interesting enough. We don't bring anything to the world. Also...
Neither did people in universities.
Didn't get not yet.
Neither did people in universities.
I know, they hate people that do things that are interesting. And that's not it, but in sport, the Institute of Sport, they don't pay back. I had to pay back my Victorian College of the Arts diploma in dramatic art. Yes, thank you. Now, a round of applause again for Bruce, who's delighted. And apparently Bruce is going to send you some information, so you better hunt him down and get his address. Now, is Megan Jones here? No. Megan, are you here, darling? You're not? Oh, Megan had a great pitch for some solar panel recycling business. So Megan, what about Richard Holtz? Are you here, Richard? Ricardo, fantastic. Please welcome Richard to the stage. He's got a pitch. Richard, look at me up there. Would you like that? Yeah, you might as well get up there. I mean, it's a good idea.
Yes, thank you. Oh, thank you.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you very much.
And Richard, while you're up there, what was the first concert you ever went to out of interest? Because that's what we always ask on RocKwiz. And I reckon you might have a good one.
Yeah, Bob Dylan, Sydney Showground.
Oh, get stuffed. What a show. That is a great concert.
I wish Brian Nankervis was here to hear that, because I think he was at that concert,
I'll
I'd say.
tell him, he'll be thrilled. Now look, enough about you and I.
And my first record that I bought with my own money was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds by Elton John.
Oh, very good. And we all know it's about Elton John. All right, here's your pen.
Yeah.
It's 8584.
Hey, get out of here.
Now
So-
you've got 90 seconds.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to it.
It's
Here
got,
you go.
it's got nothing to do with energy or anything.
That's all right.
So, is that all right? Okay.
It could be anything.
Well, my big idea is for 4-year terms for both the House of the Reps and the Senate. This would give MPs a longer period to get things done because, after 2.5 years they start getting into campaign mode. So 3.5 years sounds like a longer time. So I think they need that extra time to actually achieve results.
No more confusing half Senate elections. I can never quite work that out. I think they get 6 years or something at the moment. Forget that, just give them 4, right, like everybody else. And the big one, having a set date every 4 years. There's no calling of an early election, or is he going to call it this weekend? Oh God, there's a cyclone. You know, it's a set date, just like state government has, and you know, they can work towards that, and there's not all this speculation. So I believe it's a win-win. Thank you.
We're with you. We're absolutely with you. Look, when you see him in the street, if you've seen this, you just give him a high five, because that's a great idea. And it will be a high five, because he's quite tall. He's quite tall. Yeah, sit down. It's a comedy moment. Sit down. Leave the jokes to me. And I should point out, it's true that Ken and Bruce have been working on, instead of the higher education contribution scheme, the plan they have for solar is the solar energy contribution scheme, which of course is sex. So the government would love to fund some sex on the roof for all of us. That'd be nice. Only when the sun's shining, you say? Thank you. Oh, right from the back. That's enough beer for you. That's nice. Thank you so much. Here we go. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware of this next speaker. I don't know. She's a bit new. She's not done much talking before. Now listen, I've done a 30-episode podcast interviewing different independents around the country, and I must say they are an extremely impressive group of people. But after we did our interview with Kate, we got off from speaking with her, my producer and I just went, she's got to get in. She has just got to get in, because she was honest, informed, she had integrity, and the thing that really makes all the independents so extraordinary is their communication skills. I mean, it's so important. And their listening skills. It's so important. And how you have that crucial, tricky, difficult conversation with someone across the floor from you, which is exactly what has to happen in Parliament. You know that she's a professional working mama for a small farm and a proven community leader. She tried it on in 2022, she got so close! And so she put herself forward to do it again. Strong connections in communities. Yes. It's not just about getting a better deal for this or that. It's actually about community health. It's about having a purpose and building resilience. So again, so that we thrive and not just survive in this crazy world. Ladies and gentlemen, your magnificent independent, Kate Hall!
Thank you, Jules. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. This is such an amazing crowd, and honestly, to see this many people interested and engaged in some of the really big decisions that are facing us in a few weeks' time, it's just so heartening. You know, sometimes you hear, oh, people don't really care much about politics, or people don't care about these big decisions, but look at this room. It's amazing. I want to just, before I talk about my big idea, is to just point out that all three, so Julia, Ken and Bruce are all giants in their field. I mean, Julia, everyone knows Julia. Everyone wants a piece of this woman.
Dramatic art.
And she was being a bit modest actually, because Jules reached out to us on Instagram and just said, I just want to help. What can I do? And so we mentioned this event, and here she is, and she's driving 2 hours. So from Barrel, 5 hours. Drove up from Barrel today, 5 hours. And by the way, all of them offering this for free. We are not paying for these gigs. Everyone is generously just offering their time, which is amazing. Julia's also driving 2 hours from Orange to Mudgee tomorrow to do another event for us, again, for free. Thank you. Amazing. Ken and I have organised an event before in Lithgow, and Ken is, as Julia mentioned in the introduction, a giant in his area. He's been a physicist for over 40 years. I'd say it's over 40 years. And you might have actually even seen him interviewed on the 7:30 report this week with Laura Tingle. So he did an amazing job. So, you know, he is a man in demand, and he came all the way to Orange for us as well. So we thank you for that. And then I feel like the story with how I came across Bruce is a little bit amazing, because I was thinking to myself, you know, surely there's a better way of doing the rooftop solar and battery thing. So when I thought about all the people that I knew who were benefiting from next to zero electricity bills because they've got rooftop solar and battery, it was all the people who were wealthy enough to afford that upfront cost. And then I was talking to people, and this was like even in 2022, and I would be talking to people who were just struggling because the hugest percentage of their household, you know, costs was their electricity bill. And I was thinking, these are the people that actually need to benefit from that rooftop solar and battery. And so I kind of had this idea percolating in my head for a while. Surely we can kind of do a HEX-style thing for rooftop solar and battery. And I just kind of thought, oh, well, I don't know how I'll ever manage to get that idea out of my head and somewhere. And then in October last year, I was at the conference which Bruce just mentioned, which was Adapt New South Wales, which is amazing. And we can probably send links after this event, can't we, to everyone who registered? Right, we're going to send you links with Bruce's presentation at that conference and all these other amazing things. So Bruce stood up and was introduced as the person who designed HEX in 1989. And all of a sudden, that is the man I need to speak to. So yes, I tracked Bruce down, and here we are today. And so I have a policy on this very issue, which is, you'll be seeing that coming out in our media releases. Is that right, Jono? We haven't released it yet, have we? Soon to be released, the ICL media release. Yes. So this is a policy that I really feel strongly about, because to me it's an equity issue. You know, it's allowing people to have a permanent cost of living relief. So we talk about cost of living. When I'm talking to everyone in this campaign, what I'm hearing about most is that cost of living is you know, the biggest stress for people. So, and we have these kind of band-aid solutions, don't we? So we can cut the fuel excise, but in 12 months' time, that finishes and you're back to something really expensive. You can give people energy rebates, and that's great, but when that finishes, we're still sort of relying on this expensive form of energy. So to me, what I was looking for was permanent cost of living relief, and this was just such a great concept. And Bruce has been so generous in working through the policy and all the modelling, which shows that it works, and it ends up costing the government next to zero. Right, I better get on to my idea. But thank you to do all this generous support. It's been amazing. So my big idea, I'm going to try and explain it to you by just telling you a bit of a story, but is how can we make decisions better as a community by putting communities into the decision-making process? So I'm just going to tell you how I got to that. So when I decided that politics needed to change, so this was back before the last election, the reason I came to that decision is because I'd had the experience of going in as a constituent to my MP and being told, you know, so I would go in, for example, as head of the group Futuring Orange, which I know some people in here were a part of that group, and it was a local climate action group. So I'd go into my MP and say, here are the results of, you know, a survey of 8,000 of your constituents, all who want action on this issue. And then I'd be sort of told, look, I've got to toe the party line on that. So this is National Party, which at that time was still sort of saying, yeah, science is not settled and all those things. And then I would bring people, it was not these two gentlemen, but I had another two professors that I'd brought to Orange to do public information sessions. And I thought, right, great opportunity to come and brief our MP with these experts with decades of experience. But again, it was like, oh, actually, I'm briefed by the party. Briefed by the party. And I was thinking, okay, how can we make good decisions if our representatives aren't allowed to access the best information? And really, like, you think about it, your sitting MP should be able to pick up the phone and get the best available advice on any issue in the country. I mean, I, as a candidate, was able to do that, pick up the phone and find the best experts. So that was a little bit unsatisfactory. And then it was about how do communities get to influence political decisions. So when I speak to people around Calare, the thing I hear most often is I feel really disengaged from politics. And I feel like politics is held at arm's length from the community. So that, you know, how can I possibly influence a decision? Let's just think about housing, which is another huge issue in this area. If you had a really big idea about how you wanted to change housing, or you wanted to bring some new issues, how could you, in our current process, and with party politicians as your representative, change that? So you can either join the party, which, let's face it, most people don't do that these days, or you do the usual thing where you make an appointment with your MP, you wait 6 months for that appointment, and then you've got your little 30-minute window and you might try to convince them. But if the party line isn't in your favour, then, you know, you won't get it anywhere. So, you know, how can we change that? And so now I'm going to switch to my story to tell you my big idea, which is, how do we have better decisions made when we put communities at the centre of decision making? So this is where the story starts. I was driving from Adelaide to Orange, and I passed through the town of Hay, which is southwest New South Wales. Everyone been to Hay? Right, flat as the eye can see. 60 k's out of Hay, 10 p.m. at night with 3 kids in the car, I get a flat tyre. Yeah, lucky. But it was lucky because I then ended up being marooned in Hay for 3 days. Lovely. They've got free bicycles from the Tourist Information Centre, just a tip if anyone finds themselves in that situation. So each day when we went to pick up our bikes, we would go to this Tourist Information Centre, which happened to be also the location of the office of the local Economic Development Manager for Council. So she and I got talking one time. She said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Look, I work for a not-for-profit company, and my role is to work with communities to envisage the kind of future they want in the context of, this is specifically with communities who are getting renewable energy projects around them." And I said, my job is to try to make sure that communities feel that changes are happening with them and not to them. And to try to allay some of the fears that people have and try to make sure that there's actual long-term benefits, not just tokenistic, outcomes. And she said, "Oh my God, we so need your help. This is starting to happen with us around Hay at the moment." So then we started this process, and to be honest, at the start, I was a little bit daunted. It took a couple of months, but I worked with the council itself, and then I worked with the community as a whole. And we had a process of basically allowing the community to come in and gain the knowledge that they needed about, what was happening, and so ask all the questions that they needed. Then we sort of opened it up and said, "Look, what are your concerns? What are you worried about?" That was all articulated. And then there was the conversation around, what opportunities could come from this. And then the most enlightening conversation was, what does our community need to thrive? So the context of what I was hearing from the Economic Development Manager particularly was that Hay is totally reliant on agriculture. So every time there's a drought, the local economy just implodes, and so everyone suffers. So they were looking for some economic diversification. They had tried tourism, which, the bikes were a lovely idea, but, it's 49 degrees sometimes in summer, It's hard to push the tourism thing. So they really were looking for that economic diversification. Then when we had a conversation about what does our town need to thrive, this is what the community was sort of articulating, all the problems that Hay was facing. So young people don't stay there anymore. So that's something that sounds familiar for regional areas. Young people don't stay around anymore. We can't get another familiar thing for us. We can't get a medical appointment here in Hay. So to see even the dentist or any medical appointment, people have to get in their car and drive an hour and a half to Griffith. So, and as people get older, it gets harder and harder. They also said we don't have an aged care facility, and there's an ageing population. So there were some really key fundamental things that had been identified. But people were, as often happens with these new developments, a little reluctant. The first few sessions I went into, people were sort of had their arms crossed and, not looking very, like they were ready to be convinced at all. But it wasn't about convincing them. It was about giving them information and trying to bring everybody together to think about what do we want Hay to look like in 10, 20, 40 years. So that was common ground because everyone wanted Hay to thrive, no matter whether it was going to be these projects or some other projects. And so what we essentially did with that process of looking at what are we concerned about, what are the opportunities, what do we need to thrive, is we created this document, which I'll share with the links that we send after this session, which we just called the Principles. It was Principles for Successful Renewable Energy Development, but we just called it the Principles. It was essentially, this is the vision for Hay that the community has made. So it's nobody else, it's the community working through all those processes. And some really, really great outcomes came out of that. I'll just give you a couple of examples. So, you know, when these renewable energy developments happen, often what happens is hundreds or thousands of workers come into a town, and what the community had said they were worried about is this might then take up all the rentals in town, push up the rental prices and make rentals really unaffordable for local people. So I've actually spoken to people in Wellington for whom that has actually happened closer to home. So this is a real thing. They also had some concerns with workers' camps out of town. And remember, they had said when they're looking at what do we need to thrive, they had identified they didn't have an aged care facility. So with this process, because the community has created this vision that included those bits of information, when it came to presenting that vision to the developers who actually needed the community's support to get their projects off the ground, the developers collectively, and these are people who are competing with each other, collectively looked at that and said, right, so instead of doing things the way we would normally do it, why don't we do it the way the community's vision asks us to do it? And so what they decided to do, which is extraordinary for competing companies, is they decided to pool their resources. This is the plan, to build a very high quality workers accommodation facility right on the edge of town, built in such a way that it can become an aged care facility after everyone leaves. So, you know, this is an example where the developers wouldn't have known that that's what the community needs, had the community not been at the centre of decision making. The community didn't really know what they could and couldn't ask for. They had thought they would never, ever get an aged care facility. And yet here it is. I could give you 10 other examples, but we haven't got time. But like they ended up also getting a $30 million community benefit fund. This is for a town of 3,000 people. It's pretty good. And not a dollar of that is going to be spent by council. That is for communities to decide. Remember I said people had to drive an hour and a half for a medical appointment? So that was in the vision as an articulated need to thrive. So one of the developers said, how about we just run an electric bus between Hay and Griffith for free, and anyone can get on it to go to their medical appointments. There's also, like, the TAFE is becoming a centre of excellence for skills in renewable energy jobs so that young people do stay in Hay. So all this has been incredible. And what I found really amazing too was when I first spoke to the economic development manager, she was saying, all three levels, well, not she's council, but state and federal government are basically ignoring us. Like, we need this information, we need help, this is a big change for our community. We can't even get the New South Wales Energy Co to return our calls, and not get anything from the federal government either. But once this community vision started happening and the developers started offering all these amazing things, the word got out, and the story, this good news story got out about Hay. Suddenly, the state government rang and said, here's your dedicated person just for Hay. You know, you've now got our attention. Chris Bowen's office at federal level wanted them to come and present to them and say, you know, how did you do it? How did you get the community to come along with you? And I guess that's the other aspect too. Normally in these developments, people put submissions in for or against a project. And normally with these ones, you'll get like 80% against, because they're the only people who normally bother to put a submission in. In this case, it was reversed. So 80% submissions were in favour of the projects, which just hadn't been seen before. So what has that got to do with politics? And what I'm talking about here is, what if we had a way of doing politics differently where, in a similar way, communities were able to access all the information they need, were able to get themselves in a position of strength, like led by community. So I like to talk about community-led decision-making, and think long-term, so legacy thinking. You know, as Julia said, you know, we're in a time at the moment where, you know, there's big consequences if we make the right decision or the wrong decision. So hence why Ken was here talking about the very consequential pathways we've got with our two energy choices. What better decisions can we get on policies that I can take to Parliament as your representative in Canberra if communities are part of that decision making. And because local people, we need local expertise in these decisions as well. So for me, it's about making sure that communities are at the centre of decision making, but also having that access. So, you know, as I said, it was a frustration to me that decisions were being made in Parliament without the benefit of the best available advice and expertise. But, you know, we could be doing nights like tonight on particular issues. So, you know, housing is a very big issue in our area. We could be having a night like tonight where we had experts on housing talking to us. Everyone feels more knowledgeable. You know, people can express their ideas. I would love to do digital town halls, you know, Zoom sessions where, again, people can hear from the best available experts. I want to be talking to you about every vote that I'm looking at in Parliament, explaining why it's important and getting feedback from people as to what's important to you. So that is a way, to me, of doing politics that gets people more engaged, that feels like that politics is coming to the people and working for the people rather than something that's being held at arm's length from people. So that's my big idea, and I'd love to hear from you as we go about what your thoughts are on that and how you might feel different about politics if it looked like that, rather than looking like what we've had for the last 17, 40, 70 years. I feel it's time for change. Does anyone else feel like there's time for change?
Transparency, isn't it, about people working together? Yeah. And I think sometimes what's so frustrating with two big parties is that it's just a game. Yeah. I want it for me and how it's going to work for me. The world's in trouble. We've got to work together. And this idea, all the independents constantly talk about transparency and working together. And if you don't like it, then you won't vote for it again. But I don't think that's something I should say out loud. Now, any questions from the floor? Oh, very nice. Thank you, Kate. Are you ready? This will be good. Here we go. It's been very nice. I've been sitting next to him.
Thank you. Firstly, just thank you to the speakers tonight. I wasn't sure what to expect, to be honest, and I've been blown away. It's been really great. So, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Love the big idea. Think, probably like everyone here, it's amazing. That's exactly what I want to see in politics. My sort of concern, and I guess the biggest reason for coming tonight, was that I look around maybe the rest of the town and I'm very worried how they're going to vote. And so I guess I'm just trying to, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do we stop the wrong people from getting elected? What can we do leaving this room tonight to give you
I love this question. Thank you. Jules, were you whispering in his ear during this? Yeah. This is fantastic. Where's my campaign manager, Sarah? She's got the biggest grin on her face right now, having heard that. And I just have to, Sarah Kaufman. And I just have to quickly acknowledge that Sarah Kaufman is probably one of the busiest people I've ever met in my life. She runs 2 medical practices in Bathurst. She's a GP. She has 4 kids. And she decided she would be my campaign manager for this. And she's actually put, not the kids, but she's put her other aspects of her life on hold for 3 months. Not the husband either, yeah. To do this, which is incredibly generous. And that is really, like, you see everyone in pink T-shirts around here. It's been incredible generosity. But thank you for that question, because what Sarah would say, if she had the microphone, is what you can all do is now, between now and the 3rd of May, and in fact between pre-poll, which starts on the 22nd of April. So 50% of people in the last election voted at pre-poll. So it's really important that we sort of do the work between now and the 22nd of April. But if everyone is comfortable in pink, we have a lot more T-shirts. Just wearing them around, like when you're doing your shopping, when you're walking the dog, when you're going to yoga, whatever. It just makes people think, oh, maybe there's another option. You can be getting on, and this is Jono's area, you can be getting on our posts on social media if that's your thing, and just writing positive comments and encouraging people to really think about the issues that matter. You can, like, there's many, so basically if you get on our website, my website, and go into get involved and volunteer, there's all different things that you can do. We need people to put core flutes up if there's a Kate on your gate thing. So, yeah. So that's, you haven't got Kate on your gate yet. I'm talking about myself now in the third person, that's really weird. Then you can come to our hub, which is at the old church at Five Waves, and pick up a... Oh, thank you, Beck. So Beck is one of the hub leaders in Orange. So we've got some core foods here. What else, Sarah, do you want me to talk about that people can get involved?
If I can say, from all the volunteers I've seen, Sarah, I'll come up to you with a bloody microphone.
Yeah. Now we're putting her on the spot. Sorry, Sarah.
You can all see and how you've got 4 children you're doing this. I feel like an underachiever right now. I'm going to really have to pull my finger out. Did I say that?
Thanks, Kate.
I knew you'd love that.
Yeah, look, people think that you're not going to know what to say or you're not going to know how to represent Kate. It's about listening. It's actually listening to the other person and hearing their point of view, finding the common ground, and then, showing that there is another way to move forward. I say this a lot, so probably all the people in pink shirts have heard it. If you think about the scale of the people that you're going to meet between now and then, thinking about election, there's people in pink shirts who love Kate, and you don't need to talk to them because they're already voting for her. And there's people at the other end who probably aren't very pleasant to talk to, and you don't need to convince them. Okay, it's these people in the middle that aren't thinking about politics, that haven't thought about how they're voting, that don't understand the consequences of their vote and who they're actually voting for when they pick a certain person and how that's going to flow on in Parliament. But every conversation you all work, you all have families, you all go to church or ride bikes or do whatever it is you do. And within your sphere of influence, there is a lot that you can do. Just having conversations and saying that there is an option. Do the biggest thing you can in your sphere of influence would be my advice.
Yep. And I would say there's possibly a few pink T-shirts rolled up in the back of wardrobes, and possibly even our pale blue ones from last time, if people still have those. Thank you, Sal, who's wearing that one. So time to get them out. And, if you're a bit shy about walking through the supermarket in a big, political T-shirt, then maybe just, organise to have a coffee with 3 or 4 people, and it's a lot less daunting. But, there's just so many things you can do, but conversations are a huge one. That is actually what's going to change people's minds more than anything. If they have a conversation with someone that they trust and think, he knows what he's talking about, that's really powerful.
But it's even just... you so on.
I was making a terrible joke, it's okay.
Are you sure? I mean... All right, great. No, but also, we think people don't want to talk about it. That's the thing. You go, oh, this is going to go badly. Maybe 1 time out of 5 it will. But as Cathy McGowan, one of the founders of this independent movement, says, you've got to exercise your courage muscle. This one's exercised your courage muscle by coming back a second time to represent you.
Thank you.
Right.
One more question down there, I think,
Jules. So, it's just, sometimes you just got to go, oh, this will be weird. And in fact, online, there's some lovely independents and their volunteers going, actually, it wasn't bad as I thought, and they just really wanted to talk about what's important to them. That's all right. Where's the question? Yeah. Who put up there?
Down near the fire hydrant.
Near the fire hydrant. Great. Oh, safety first, I always say.
As a young voter, during school, you're only really taught about the 2 parties, like Labour and Liberal, maybe National, if you're listening. But as an independent party, while you're really good in the community, I'm a bit confused with all the big parties. How can you really make a difference in the
Such a good question. Such a good question. Thank you so much for that one.
Very good question.
Yeah. It is interesting, isn't it, that you only learn about the big parties at school. I guess independents, weren't as common, although we had a wonderful independent. Who remembers Peter Andren? Yeah. So we did have a wonderful independent for many years, I think maybe 3 terms. Yeah. In the past. But yeah, there was this notion that only that side or that side can run the country, and it's really wrong, because what we've seen in this term of Parliament, which I found really heartening, is that because there are more independents in the middle of that side and that side, you see much more robust argument, and you see debate. You see much more, on 2 sides, you've got independents who can hold the government of the day to account and, you know, shake the finger, but also equally on a positive side, they can give the government the backbone to do what they know they really should do, but they haven't been able to do it for so long because, you know, of politics. And I guess one thing I didn't mention, but I've talked about before, is that, you know, when I sort of came to the conclusion that politics was the barrier to getting some really big action done, and especially for young people. I have 4 children myself, so young people is my entire motivation for doing this. You know, just creating a livable future for young people and a fair go and affordable housing and affordable cost of living for young people. You know, for so long it was so obvious what needed to be done, but the 2 major parties over time just became more and more beholden to those corporations that were funding them, which largely historically have been fossil fuel companies, hence we couldn't move forward with that. So to my mind, the more independence you have in, the less undue influence those big corporations have, and the more we can just have evidence-based policy, talking to people like Ken and Bruce and every other expert in Australia on the issues, rather than being dictated to by a party as to what we can and can't do. Did that answer your question? And I feel like, as Julia said, you know, there's some really great examples of, you know, we have an anti-corruption commission now at a federal level. That's because of an independent Helen Haynes who just pushed for that. Before that, the parties used to think it was impossible. Barnaby Joyce, when he was leader of the National Party, was quoted as saying, you know, we can't have a federal anti-corruption commission because then politicians will be terrified to come to work. It's a fairly easy solution to avoid that terror.
But also those kind of jokes, we're done with that.
Yeah.
Like it's, it is the most important job in the land. Are you insane? That's what blows my mind.
Yeah.
With independence, I think what you get too is that these extraordinary people who have had lives and have done jobs and have worked hard and have been in the system as a real punter and a real person. Imagine that being in Parliament, representing you. And just here, just Calare. So the extra stuff that all the people in the Labor and Liberal Party, and hey look, I voted Labor my whole life as my family as well. You know, I don't want to, but I'm going to choose the best people that are doing the job, right? And time's ticking. That's my big fear.
Yeah, and to me, this is not the end of party politics.
No,
this is just giving them enough of a shake-up that they operate in a way that's actually beneficial for Australia.
Well, here I come. Jazz run. Pivot. You don't want me to yell from there, that'd be nuts.
You've mentioned housing a few times, so what is your policy on how to improve the situation?
Yes, it's a huge area. We'll probably talk for half an hour on that, but there's 4 main sort of areas that I talk about with housing, after sort of looking at examples all around Calare and talking to people in the space.
So we need housing that's sustainable now. So we know that building materials, you know, they have their own embedded carbon, and also if we make more sustainable housing, it's cheaper to live in those houses because they're better insulated and you're spending less to heat and cool them, etc. So sustainable, affordable is you know, a given. So having a certain percentage of every development being given over to social or affordable housing is part of that. Resilient housing is something that I don't think we've talked about enough, but you know, if you speak to colleagues of these 2 at ANU who specialise in climate, you know, what they talk about, I'm thinking about, do you guys know Barbara Norman at ANU? Yes. She is one of Australia's leading regional regional planning experts, and she talks about heat waves being the biggest threat now. You know, we know that, you know, lives are lost with floods and fires, etc. But heat waves are the next big one. And you know, people who are not in resilient housing are vulnerable in their own house. So we need it to be resilient, and we need a diversity of housing. So when I'm speaking to young people about housing, and they think about, you know, how do I get my own house eventually? They look at developments that we've seen in Orange in recent decades, where there's just continued urban sprawl, and everything that's on offer there is a 3-bedroom house with, you know, 2 bathrooms and 2 garages. And young people just say, neither do I want that, nor can I afford that. So where's the option for me so that I'm not, you know, saddling myself with this massive debt for something I don't want and need? So we need a diversity of housing. So I did do a little video, it's on my social media somewhere, of a visit I had to this fabulous example of this in Lithgow. So it was the old Lithgow TAFE building, 100 years old, had been empty and derelict for 30 years, and it's now been transformed into 17 specialised units, different options, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom studio, special disability access units. So this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. And, in regional towns, so in Wellington recently, I was talking to some locals there, and they were mentioning that every third or fourth shop in the street is empty. And what an opportunity there to make some really diverse housing. And to me, that would be a real draw card to this region as well. This is what we've been talking about in Lithgow. Also, like imagine if people were in Sydney, young people saying to each other, do you know you can get this really funky studio apartment in Wellington, and it's only going to cost you this much, you'll pay it off by the time you're 25 and then, you're debt free. That's the sort of thing that I think we need to be thinking about. And also it addresses the issues of urban sprawl and all the environmental things that go along with that. So there's a whole lot to housing, but I hope that gives you a bit of an idea.
It's a big job, is what we're saying. One more question. This is your second question from you. I'm wondering, will it be less of a comment than a question like it was last time? It's like when you're on Q&A, they do the long story. Is it a good question? Will you be proud of it when you say it?
Okay, this one crosses pretty much everything that's been covered tonight. Everything from rental housing to affordability to energy efficiency in homes and ICL and everything. One thing that I don't think that's been fully covered tonight is renters.
Yeah.
They can't get loans to modify the house that they're living in. Oh, I know some renters that live in horrible houses.
Yes.
They freeze in winter, they cook in summer.
Yep.
And electricity is horribly expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, with new rental housing, yes, there's energy standards, they have to be minimum 7-star and everything, but there's this massive stock of existing buildings. What do we do about that?
Yeah, renters definitely are not forgotten. In fact, Bruce and I have talked about how to include renters in the policy that I just talked about before with rooftop solar battery. So I'll let Bruce say a little bit about renters in relation to ICLs. And then Andrew, do you want to, because you had, so someone else who had a pitch over there, that's actually exactly on this. Do you want to just come up while Bruce is answering and you can do your pitch?
When you think about income contingent loans and you start with HECS, it's wage and salary earners, it's very obvious. And we've done it with respect to households. We've done most of the work on people who own their own houses, but all the work now is moving into the rental issues. And the rental issues are more complex, but there are still ways of applying contingent debt, income contingent loans. Many people who rent properties only have one property, and we've done the modelling to have income contingent loans on them. But when it comes to the other landlords who've got multiple properties, you can treat this as a business. So you can have revenue contingent loans. Of course, it's in their interests to electrify, because the costs of the benefits of living in an electrified apartment are obvious because your electricity bills are lower. So that's the next stage of all this. But everything that I've talked about and we've done the modelling on can be transferred into the landlords as a business contingent debt. You can put subsidies on it to encourage that because it's good for the planet, or it can be done, and we're now doing it right now, on income contingent loans for people with just 1 or 2 properties. It all works just the same.
Yeah, so you raised a really important question because this is a very thorny issue in many jurisdictions. So in the discussions I've had with the ACT government about this, about putting solar on the roof of landlords' houses and all the rest of it, Bruce is right in the sense that a landlord in theory could charge a slightly greater premium for doing that on the basis that the renter will get free electricity. However, that doesn't work because we have a shortage of rental properties in the current market. It only works when there aren't a line of renters out the door banging on the door down to try and get into the house. So the landlord doesn't need to offer free electricity in the house. They just keep on giving the same low standard rental accommodation with no solar on the roof, no insulation, no induction cooktops, all the rest of it, because there's no need to. If that changes, and there are very few people knocking on the door, then I think you'll see landlords putting solar on the roof and doing all of these other good things because it gives them an edge.
Gives them an edge.
And I think your idea, Andrew, is related to this.
Hi, Andrew.
Look, my thunder has very much been stolen by your answers that you've been given so far. But my concern really is we talked about the poor being locked out of the solar revolution that we all want to embrace. So it's only open to, at this stage, only open to home owners. So what about the renters, but not just the renters, what about the apartment dwellers? And what about the elder Australians who are wanting to put solar on, but they think that, well, we may have to move into a retirement village in a minute, and why would we put that investment into it? And then there's the other investment property owners that you were talking about. I heard the other day someone has 26 properties. 26 properties. I'm wondering how many of those properties have solar on them. We should ask Peter that. So my solution basically, there has been some examples in Scandinavia of what they call a solar stock exchange, where people can buy a slice of a solar farm, for instance, or a wind farm, and that would counter their electricity bill. Now, if we could have income contingency loans that would enable people to buy into a solar stock exchange, I'm sure that something along those lines would work. So that's basically my big idea.
Thank you so much. I mean, my brain's fizzing. I love a brain that fizzes with ideas. Our final pitch, please make him welcome, John O.
Okay, my pitch is called Take Me Home Solar Roads. Please sing along. Big ideas start as a dream. So imagine if our highways were also giant solar panels soaking up the sun as we drive along them each day. Built into the road are a number of extras. Mobile reception, meaning there are no black spots as you drive along. With an adapter underneath your EV, you can recharge as you go along, drawing electricity from the road. At night, especially helpful in foggy conditions, not that we'd have that anywhere in Calare, the road lights up ahead of you and where your vehicle is located on the road. If you have stopped for any reason, the road beneath you turns red to warn others in advance. If the body heat of an animal, such as a roo, a wombat, or even an echidna, is detected at night, a red glow shows up to let drivers know in advance. If debris is on the road, such as a fallen branch or objects fallen from a vehicle, then an orange glow shows up until it is cleared. And if lane distribution needs to shift to allow for more traffic in one direction over the other, or a breakdown has occurred, the road shifts its built-in lighting in moments to indicate this without the need for millions of plastic witches' hats. 6 kilometres of witches' hats before the road works, which is about 100 metres long. Love it. Just saying, we start with the highways, we then move into secondary roads, knowing that not all roads may be suitable. The energy is then stored in batteries built into the underneath of the road or in rest areas along the highways. This is the start of an idea, and more could be done with it. It could help power bigger vehicles like buses and trucks. It could include built-in emergency service functions. It could power lighting and electric signage along the roads. And Calare would be the perfect place to pilot this idea for Australia.
you we are showing a screening of No Safe Seat and a film called Regenerating Australia. And that whole film is about, imagine it's December 2029, this is what the world could look like. And when I hear the big ideas out here and ideas here that have been modelled, that's what we're looking for. That's what we need, and surely that's what must make us fizz with energy, that amazing brains are coming together, and we all have that capacity to come up with an idea and come together and share it, and that's what we need most of. So a round of applause for the amazing pictures this evening. And would you please thank our speakers this evening, Ken, Bruce and Kate. Two more things. Of course, we do need more volunteers, that we've touched on earlier. So we need more volunteers to sign up to support Kate by working on the polling booths before and on election day, as was mentioned. The strength of your presence, of these pink T-shirts on election day at the polling booths, can make a difference for some people, because they genuinely meet someone who's sunny and happy, gives them something. They're for the ones who you maybe even haven't even decided. But as you were saying, it's looking for the people who are kind of in between, Sarah, who are like, nah, I want some more information. So we need volunteers not only in Orange, but places like Millthorpe, Molong. Yes, Molong. All right, here we go. Cumnock. Canowindra. Manildra. Cargo, easy. Cuddle. Coudal. Non, mais je m'excuse tout le monde, bien sûr, j'aurais dû dire Coudal, mais non. C'est ma faute, hein, c'est ma faute. Pardonnez-moi, c'est pas ma première langue, it's not my first language. Wellington and Yagara. We'll also be at locations, at local events such as the Man from Ironbark Festival in Stewarttown on Easter Saturday and Molong Village Markets on Easter Monday. Volunteers will be needed then. And also with volunteering, it's just the best way to actually find out who's in that community. And every single one I've been to, honestly, people are saying, I've made more friends than I ever thought possible. And gee, we can all do with friends, frankly. Tonight, if you see one of our volunteers in pink T-shirts at the back, and put your name on the list. So on that lovely list that when you were coming in, we just needed to get started early. Please, you can fill out in the foyer. There'll be little hub lists that you can fill out. So it's about realising the power of your vote. We need people in Parliament who are thinking long term and who are open to these incredible ideas and open to talking to experts. And we're here tonight because there's a very important election coming up. You've had a taste of what it's like to listen to experts and bring their expertise to you. Your sitting member, my sitting member, should be able to pick up the phone and call the best possible experts in Australia on any given issue: health, or housing, or childcare, or energy, or aged care. Because guess what, everyone? We're all going to need aged care if we're lucky. The way people carry on about how aged care is never going to come to you, it is. If you enjoyed what you saw here tonight, please share it and tell every single person that you know. And if you didn't, well, a little bit of shush. Because nobody likes the whinger. You've been